Pain at the pump has been a major talking point throughout 2022, but as prices have been dropping this month, are they poised to jump back in the near future? Well, according to GasBuddy, prices in most U.S. cities could reach $4 a gallon again come springtime. So for more on this, we welcome in Patrick de Haan, GasBuddy head of Petroleum Analyst. Patrick, thank you for joining us here today. So what should we expect with gas prices in the near future?
Well, certainly a little bit of good news, a little bit of bad news. I think overall the good news is that Americans in the household will spend less on gasoline in 2023 than they did in 2022. But it wouldn't be a normal year without the spikes that we see in spring and prices then going back down in fall. And eventually, while we're enjoying relatively low prices now, I'm afraid that with China reopening this spring could see a nice spike, and that could bring the national average back above the $4 a gallon mark. But the good news is we're not expecting the record highs that we saw in 2022 of over the $5 a gallon level.
Yeah, Patrick, we just did a Yahoo Finance. Rick Newman was just on set talking about the predictions that our viewers wrote in. And that was one of the predictions that gas prices were going to be back above $4 a gallon because of China lifting its restrictions. Let's talk, though, about the higher prices, how long it could potentially be above $4 a gallon. Are we talking about throughout next summer?
I think that's certainly a strong possibility. It's really going to be contingent on if refineries are able to meet demand and what Americans do this summer, given the fact that prices may be lower. Do we see a big jump in demand? I think demand was struggling this summer under the weight of some of those high prices. So if a lot of Americans deferred travel, they may want to get back out on the road, given the fact that gas prices this summer could be a little bit less. But I would say that probably between Memorial Day and Labor Day, you may see $4 a gallon for several weeks, maybe beyond that. Of course, a lot mixed into how China is looking and how much of their economy is reopening and what we see in terms of consumption from China.
Patrick, we had a number of curveballs in 2022. Europe opened up and we had suddenly found ourselves in a war embroiled in a war between Russia and Ukraine. Wondering what you're thinking about in terms of potential headwinds or stuff out of the blue in the new year.
Well, I think refining will continue to be a headwind. It was a challenge in 2022, and I think we're going to get a little bit more breathing room in terms of refining capacity. Not so much in the U.S. We're going to add about 275,000 barrels a day of capacity, thanks to ExxonMobil's refining project that's been underway for 3 years in Texas. More so, we're going to get breathing room overseas, Africa opening refineries, additional capacity in Asia, as well as the Middle East, all likely helping to create some breathing room. But there still could be the seasonal challenges related to the switch over to summer gasoline as refiners carry out that maintenance. And keep in mind, the extreme cold weather that we saw across the U.S. last week also caused a lot of refinery disruption. So that's going to be the wild card this year, as well as I think China's economy. They appear to be embracing easing the restrictions. And so there could be a level of pent-up demand in China that we saw here in the U.S. a couple of years ago, and that could be a wild card as well.
And Patrick, when it comes to higher prices in terms of areas of the country that are likely to see the highest prices, is that going to be consistent with what we saw last year when you take a look at California, obviously being one of the outliers and experiencing much higher prices than what we saw in many other parts?
Yeah, absolutely. The model last year was certainly that the coasts felt a lot more of the pain, particularly the mid-Atlantic, the Northeast areas that are reliant on more imports, and the West Coast also somewhat segmented away from the rest of the country. So both the extremes, the Northeast and the West Coast, likely to see some of those refinery challenges persist. California certainly could see the return of $5, even $6 a gallon gasoline if refinery issues are significant this year. Much of the Northeast still also relying on imports because of Russia's war in Ukraine. A lack of refining capacity in the Northeast also could point to prices that in New York, areas of New England could exceed $5 a gallon again this year.
We're just recovering here in the Northeast from a bitter cold spell, storm that passed through. Just wondering the implications that this might have had on the energy market overall, including heating, gas prices. Kind of give you the floor for the last question here.
Well, we've seen a lot of volatility in natural gas. Things have really plummeted, but there's still the possibility that if natural gas surges due to cold spells, there could be switches back over to using oil, diesel, and heating oil. So that's a huge wild card, but the Northeast is going to be very susceptible to bouts of cold weather. Keep in mind, much of the Northeast consumes heating oil, I think that's going to be a challenge this winter. Diesel and heating oil likely to remain rather expensive, comparing that to gasoline for much of the winter.
All right, Patrick Haan, always great to have you of GasBuddy. Thanks so much for joining us here this afternoon.